Okay, so this weekend has brought us what I thought was the sequel no one asked for in Pirates of the Caribbean 5. Uh, and the thing was, though, that I learned over the past couple of days was that maybe this isn't exactly that, and maybe people actually wanted this movie and ended up really liking it for the most part. And it's another one of those movies in a long list of movies we're getting now where it's the fans love it, fuck the critics movies that seems to be ever growing. So I don't know. The thing, well, before I say anything else, I would just like to say that I've mentioned this before, but one Roger Ebert quote that always stuck with me was, I love movies too much to want anybody to have a bad time at one. So I'm not gonna say fuck you for liking it. All I'm saying when I say what I'm about to say is how I personally felt about this movie. So this is in no way derogatory towards the many, many people that seem to really be taking to it. If that is a little baffling to me, still, I'm not gonna fault anybody, I suppose. So, when we start off, obviously, there was there's some stuff from On Stranger Tides in here, but for the most part, On Stranger Tides probably didn't need to happen, is what this movie's basically saying, which we all knew that. So we're basically picking up where, the post-credit scene of At World's End left off. And we have Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann's son, Henry, I think, is his name. And there's I have no idea what people know and what's considered a spoiler in regards to what our setup is here. But I will just say the plot basically follows Will Turner's son. And the thing here is that a lot of people were trying to figure out how this movie was going to turn out because, as we all know, this movie had an extremely troubled production. This movie feels like it's been in production for years and years. I feel like I saw the first still of Javier Bardem like 7 years ago. It feels like a really long time ago. And a lot of it apparently had to do with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's marriage going down the shitter, thus making him just not show up to set a lot of days. And it's like, well, given that Johnny Depp has really kind of been known lately for phoning in about 99% of his performances, like the only exception is Black Mass. But the thing here is, we were all kind of waiting, like, well, if Depp's been phoning it in for this long, what is this gonna turn out to be like? And yeah, it is very much like, it's sort of like Depp is trying to do an impression of his former self throughout most of this movie. Because I've mentioned this before, particularly in I think the Willy Wonka video, where it was like, when Depp did Pirates, that was like a brand new thing in 2003, and when he did Willy Wonka and kind of tried to keep that same personality and that same way of playing things a couple years later, it was still kind of new and fresh and everybody loved him for it. But then, through these past 14 years, he's kind of just stuck to that, mostly. And it's taken a great character, a really, really great character that he initially got an Oscar nomination for, that he almost won, because he won SAG that year. That gets you very close to winning. And it is just so... It was tired about 20 minutes into Dead Man's Chest. For me, anyway. So, you can probably see my problem here 5 movies in now. And the thing here is, I did kind of chuckle at the initial reveal when they opened the thing and he's in there. Not only is he in there, but who he's in there with. And then he just kind of, it's like he's trying to, it's almost like, it's hard to say sound bites is kind of what you're looking for. Like there is a moment when he wakes up from sleeping and says, what is it, Spaghetti Wolf or something, and it's like this character has gone from this magnificent, flamboyant character with all these memorable lines that'll be imitated forever, little did we know by the actor that initially betrayed him. But it seems like he's been so whittled down to just... It's almost like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies exist now for fans, strictly for fan service for people that love the character of Jack Sparrow. And it's becoming clear that I thought it was really nice. I think On Stranger Tides isn't as bad as a lot of people have made it out to be, and I think the reason for that is because the original trilogy of it, if you can call it that, is that you gotta love when you look at the spines on the DVD cases, how like Dead Man's Chest and Net Worlds then have a 2 and 3 on them, like they're gonna count them through. But then by the time they got On Stranger Tides, they just stopped doing that because it's like we don't know how far we're going. It's not gonna be a trilogy anymore, obviously, so we'll just go with it. But what I'm saying is, in this original trilogy, it started off with really, Jack Sparrow is kind of a supporting character. I mean, he's there, he's the most flamboyant one, he's the one that the advertising puts all up in your face, and he's the one you really remember. But I'm not disputing he's a leading character or anything, but I think it feels that when you look at the fact that Will and Elizabeth's story is so prominent also, almost completely in the foreground, and the fact that On Stranger Tides pushed them out, it felt like Jack was front and center again in that movie, and that's kind of where I felt we needed to be. When he's not, because it's still a good character when he's not doing the totally played out bullshit, which sadly is what he does most of the time when he's playing him. But On Stranger Tides made me say, even though I'm kind of sick of the character, if they could just make the story about him and he's not just there to slapstick around in the background, then maybe we have something. Well, this is where the movie falls almost immediately. There are two things the movie needs to accomplish by putting Brenton Thwaites in it. Brenton Thwaites, I've been saying this since Oculus came out. I have no idea what the fuck studios see in him. I have no idea. He's like that Jai Courtney type where it's like, no, he doesn't really have fans, he's not very good, but they just keep putting him in shit. They just do. Like, he's just like a go-to guy or somebody. Like he's a studio head's nephew or something. But it's... And then we go into that. So the reason his character seems to be here is, one, so we can shoehorn Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann back into this story. And two, so we can do the really, really tired thing where, well, we're running out of characters, and the characters have basically been written out. What do? Do we create new characters? Do we do something like... Do we do something that's got its own origin and, like, really build it? Or do we just say, nope, this new character, that's going to be basically the face of this movie, is just the son of a character that we already know? Because that really, Creed notwithstanding, how often does that work? Really? It's kind of a kiss of death, for the most part. And it continues to be here. They also try to introduce the character Karina. And Karina, of course, is one of those characters where about half the things she does, she either says... She's either making reference to the fact that she's a woman, or there's dudes standing off to the side to be shocked or impressed by something because she's a woman. She's that character. And that's about the extent of it. She spends most of the movie being mistaken for a witch. After that, I couldn't tell you. I got back from the movie about an hour ago, and I already couldn't tell you most about that character, except for the plot turn about halfway through with her, which was just... I'm telling you, just shoehorning these people in and then saying, oh no, they're totally connected. It's like, just fuck off. Just, it feels so like a screenwriter came up with a character and didn't really know what to do with them or how to connect them to anything whatsoever, so it's like, family. We'll use that. We'll just go with that. So it is worth noting, I believe the first four, all four of them are done by the same two writers. And then on this one, it's a new screenwriter, and one of those two original screenwriters has a story credit. So that's like, you can still have, even though I thought the original trilogy did get bad, there's always kind of a comfort that at least it would be taken down by the people that made it. It always feels like much more of an insult, I think, when it's some new fuck that just comes in and fucks it all up. But still, I can see it from the other perspective too, but still, so that's basically, we finally got to that point with this one. And you'll notice one of the supposed high points that was going to be of this movie was this villain played by Javier Bardem, who is Christoph waltzing through his career now, I guess. It's like, hey, he's a really good villain once, let's just kind of keep doing it. So, and he's, it's basically, and we've seen, and much like Waltz, he tends to make it work, because it's like, well, he's going to play a Bond villain in Skyfall after he did No Country, and it's like, that seems like a bit of typecasting, let's see what he does. And sure enough, he fucking killed it in Skyfall. He's fucking amazing in Skyfall. But the thing here is, there's not really a whole lot for him to do here, and when he does seem to have something, they just kind of tease it, and then they don't give it to us. About 95% of his dialogue is just saying Jack Sparrow's name, for starters. And then we get this thing where I love, like, the build-up to him, where it's like he walks on his swords and shit, and he's got, like, you almost kind of imagine, like, Raul Julia playing this part at some point, back in the day or something. And he's got a lot of build-up, but then, and I love his little introductory scene, too, when he drops the title. It's not even cheesy, it's actually really cool. That nice introduction. And then there's the really great scene when Barbossa's standing here and he's like barking orders, and then Salazar just lands behind him, and Barbossa knows it's him because of the sound of those swords, and Barbossa just has this horrified look on his face before he turns around, and they're face to face. And I thought that was just there's so much build up to this character, and then they really didn't use it enough. And I do like his appearance. I had heard complaints when the trailers were coming out that people thought it was too CGI heavy. But I do think it works in the context with like some of his face missing and the fact that his hair constantly moves, like it's always underwater. But for the most part, the one scene that really did me in with this was the flashback. About why he wants revenge against Jack Sparrow when Disney was like, hey, you know all that stuff we're using with Marvel to make actors look younger? Let's try that with Johnny Depp. Not quite as flawless as, say, Michael Douglas or Kurt Russell or Downey, but... but anyway, this flashback, the thing that bothered me was, for starters, Dead Man Totally tells a tale when we're getting this flashback, but that's how we get the flashback. But, so this story is told to us by Salazar, and we're seeing it because Disney wanted to spend a whole lot of money. So we actually get to see, and I know people probably, if we didn't see it, people would probably complain, they should have shown us, why the fuck he's so pissed off at Jack Sparrow. So they do show you that, but number one, it's quite underwhelming. It's just a usual ship and cannons and fire bullshit. But the thing that also really makes this scene not work is we get these little cuts back to Salazar while we're seeing the flashback, and it's him telling the story. You can tell Bardem's really into it. Like, he's just really into this monologue. He's doing it like he's on the stage or something, and he's really into it. And this just had me saying, I feel like, quite honestly, I don't care how big Disney's budget is, or the fact that, yeah, people probably would have been pissed if we didn't actually get to see the battle, but quite honestly, in my personal opinion, I think Salazar telling the story the way Javier Bardem would have been more than enough to get the point across. If it was just a monologue of his that didn't cut away, I really feel like... Because it's almost like with all the effects, the movie's afraid of the actual acting. Because, like I said, we had real acting like, Depp in the first movie got a damn Oscar nomination. And it's like... the more we go, the more it's like they're trying to hide any of that. They just want it to be like all spectacle and all comedy slapstick bullshit. Not that I have anything against the comedy, because it can be really funny, especially in the first movie. But I mean, I know they're really trying to go for it's like an Errol Flynn meets Buster Keaton type thing. And just ask anybody that knows me. I almost pull my hair out every time I'm watching Dead Man's Chest. That fucking wheel thing, and just the whole, him like tied to that pole, and this is really, I get it, like, because you do these big spectacular action scenes, kind of like the kind of stuff that Jackie Chan does, that's like all in one shot and shit. Where it's like you want to go big, and it's also in kind of a humorous way because it's so big, like the better portions of the Fast and Furious movies, for instance. Yes, I'm sure it has to have already been mentioned that the opening scene of this movie with Jack is basically the climax of Fast 5 when they're pulling the vault, only bigger. But obviously bigger does not necessarily mean better, or in any shape or form whatsoever. But still, and it gets, honestly, to the most ridiculous levels that I just can't, like, I kind of get why it's there, but it's just, they go way too damn far with it and devote way too much time to it, and it really just makes the movies fucking stupid. Just, there's really no other way I can put it. Where it's, like this thing, where it doesn't feel, they get so involved in that, it doesn't feel like pirate movies anymore. It feels like really, really, really massive, massive budget physical comedies. It doesn't, because when you go back to the first one, you have the scenes like when Jack and Will have a sword fight in that barn. And that scene is incredible, and we had stuff like that all throughout the first movie, with some slapstick stuff here and there, and some funny shit here and there. But it all tied together, it was all smooth, there was a nice little balance there, but it was mostly like swashbuckling shit, and not God knows what. Now, that fucking guillotine thing it's like this fucking movie's wheel thing from Dead Man's Chest, and it is ridiculous, and not in a good way. And I know, and to kind of go on that, also talking about going over the top and ridiculous, I can only imagine what the internet's probably saying about Salazar's Sharks. Because movies today tend to be, with like this Fast and Furious age and other movies that just try to, the idea for blockbuster seems to be just how far over the top are we going to go. Like how this new Transformers has like Nazis and King Arthur in it or something. And it's like the movies are made to just get people on the internet just pointing out these little things. It's just so they can have the headline like, "You'll never believe how batshit crazy this movie is." When usually, number one, they're usually just tiny, tiny portions of the movie that are really, really blown up just to get attention. And in this shark thing, I can imagine, for starters, believe it or not, it actually makes a little sense. Because everything on Salazar's ship is dead. That is the point. Everything is like The Walking Dead. We've been doing that whole thing since the first movie. That the pirates are dead and they're here and all that. And I do like some of them, like the pirate that's basically just a hat and a sword, and the one that's like missing half his head. They're all dead and they're all kind of zombified, and it makes sense. That's why Salazar looks the way he does. So if those sharks were on his ship, yeah, that's what those sharks are. But I can just only imagine them being called like zombie sharks, and people saying, "Oh, they'll probably think they're really damn clever," saying something like, "This is where this movie really jumped with the shark, only literally," or some bullshit. I don't know. But if there's one thing, basically this is me defending the sharks, I guess, because it's. But yeah, it does still kind of come off as one of those things where it's like, if we did this and we went this far over the top with sharks that look like this, I'll bet, you know, the internet's going to be the internet. I don't know. Thus getting more attention and more stuff drawn to it that really has nothing to do with anything in the long run. But that's what the internet does, so let's let them. I know I'm technically part of that by doing this, but still. So, and that's the thing too, is another thing that really goes off with this one that I really started to dislike about the other movies was when you look at the first movie, a big portion of it was that they were all dead. Then they stepped in the moonlight and they were skeletons and shit because of the curse. And there was that supernatural element to it. But the really cool thing about that was this was a huge, giant pirate movie. One that we hadn't seen in a very, very long time, that did everything that it did in that particular area really damn well. And it also managed to throw in this supernatural aspect to it that actually fit in with the story and added a cool little element to it. It wasn't like the sole focus. It just so happened a lot of characters in this movie were already dead. And they worked that in. Like, it was, it's actually to a point where it figures into the story so well that when I talk about, when we get to At World's End, and it's like, this supernatural bullshit, this is not what the series is, but then I have to remember, oh yeah, we actually did have a lot of supernatural stuff in the first movie. But they go so damn overboard with it, that's like all these movies are now, is the supernatural aspect. And that is so not the appeal of the original movie. It's a really cool side aspect to it. It's not the whole damn thing. And that's really where the series just keeps shitting itself as it goes, because it keeps wanting to grasp onto that supernatural thing more and more and more. And that's the thing. That's another thing I kind of like about On Stranger Tides, is it still had that shit, obviously, but it didn't seem to go into it near as much by the time At World's End got to the shit it was doing. So, so that's where I just really feel like these movies really, really lost their way after the first movie. I used to say that Dead Man's Chest was one of the worst movies I'd ever seen. After watching it again recently, I don't think that, and I think it probably is better than At World's End. At World's End was a lot worse than I remembered. And at almost 3 hours. That's another thing. This movie is 2 hours and 9 minutes. It is the shortest one. So it's almost like it's showing us mercy. So it's almost like you want to kind of give it credit for that, but then again, maybe not. And it's another one of those things where something that keeps occurring throughout the movie that was just driving me up the fucking wall was this whole thing about none of the characters, nothing bad was going to happen to any of the main characters, because there is always something really, really stupid that is going to keep them from being in any kind of danger. Now, I know it's a Pirates movie, and you're like, well, dude, you should have suspended your disbelief a long time ago. But when it happens over and over and over again, that's the problem. And this movie does that. Like, let's start with the guillotine thing, where he's over here and Karina's over here, and she's going to be hung and he's going to get his head cut off. And they start arguing, and because they're arguing, the entire crowd and the executioner have stopped what they are doing to watch this argument. And this is how they eventually escape death. They are killing time and killing time and killing time until Henry can come in, and then Henry's got the fucking cavalry, and so on. So there's like, oh, fine, whatever. But then in that very same scene later, she has come down and Henry has caught her, and a guy walks up and he's got a gun and he's like, I'm gonna shoot this guy and kill him and hang her at the same time. It's 2 birds with 1 stone. And it's like, yeah, that guy's really got it made right now. It's like, go ahead, guy, do it. And he fucking stands there and stands there and stands there like he's just fucking waiting for Jack to come up and hit him with something. And this shit happens through the whole thing. There's this whole stupid wedding thing, and Barbossa comes in and saves the day in the same way. That's a whole scene that's drawn out for comedy, just to get Barbossa and Jack to cross paths. And I don't even remember how Barbossa knew he was there. So that's how this movie got to 2 hours and 9. This is how this movie got to be the shortest in the series so far. Was this shit. And so, we continue on, and like I said, there's comedy everywhere. In the first one, I remember laughing my ass off when I saw Curse of the Black Pearl in theaters. I was only 12 at the time, but still, the movie's still damn good. I just watched it last week, again. Still amazing. But, when you get to the comedy here, I noticed, for 11 o'clock in the morning, when I saw this, there were quite a few people in there. I was surprised. And so, I'm basically watching with them. And the thing here is that these are people that really, really want to see this. These are people that are fans of the series, that don't care what stupid shit happened in Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, and on Stranger Tides too, I guess. So they're watching it, and you can just kind of tell it's sometimes something funny would happen, and you could tell they were forcing the laugh, because it wasn't too heavy, and there wasn't a lot of passion in it. It's just something that's funny was supposed to happen, so they'll give it a laugh, because they paid for their ticket. Why not? But a lot of the comedy in this movie, in my theater anyway, was met with silence. And I don't know if people... I don't want to go into the whole thing of, do people say they like the movie because they want to or not. I'm sure people legitimately had a good time with this. I really wish I could have been one of them. I really wish I could have. And I really thought maybe, you know, adding some of this stuff, like this new story and this new villain, had potential to really bring something to it. But I just don't know. There was nothing... I don't know. But then there is... And then they keep bringing shit up, like Jack's Compass. So, this is basically the most... basically, Jack's Compass in this series basically exists to serve whatever purpose the current movie needs it for. And it's like... And it's... I don't know. There's... It just seems like the people who, like the guy that wrote this, the guy that took over, it's like barely watched the other movies if he did at all, or if he like just saw an abridged version of it written down, like just like bullet points, and then he just kind of went his own thing. Like the bullet point for Jack Thomas was, Jack's Compass is important, and then he just was like, okay, I'll just use that for my own thing or whatever. And it's so... I don't know. It just reeks of... They seriously have no idea what they're doing when they go into these. It's just Disney wants to make another one. Johnny Depp probably needs more money. And there's... I don't know. I did just see an article that said that if Johnny Depp doesn't go on, they won't go on. I hope that's true. I know that there's a little tease that makes you wonder. I don't know. I would like to think... I would think he is like... I would like to think he's almost done with it now. Did you hear about the alternate ending to Birdman? Because you know how Birdman was about, Michael Keaton's character was stuck with one famous character that he couldn't get out of, a franchise character, and that's all anybody ever thought about him. They wouldn't take him seriously anymore, they only associated him with that character, and it was him trying to break out. And Inarritu actually had an alternate ending to that movie they were going to shoot, but I think they thought like it would mess up the tone or something. But it was going to be after the final scene with Keaton, the camera was going to pan over to another dressing room, and it was going to be Johnny Depp in there. And you know how Keaton was hearing the Birdman voice in his head throughout that movie? It was going to be Depp hearing Jack Sparrow's voice in his head. And so I'd like to think, I actually kind of would have loved that ending. The movie probably wouldn't have won Best Picture, but I still would have loved that ending. And the other and just as far as the lazy writing goes, not just the compass, but there is a quote from Small Soldiers in this movie. The just because you can't see something doesn't mean it isn't there line, but we're supposed to take it seriously. It's not like she was saying, you know, oh, by the way, like they said in Small Soldiers, that I would have killed for her to hear her say this in this particular time period. But apart from that, also, there is, I have a whole lot, I can't read this, it was so dark in there. It does have another one, there's predictability around every single corner. It's one of those cases where anytime there's like a little tiny bit of setup to something, you know exactly what the next scene is. All the way down to even those little moments, like when, he's in like a bed or a hospital or something, and this nun walks up to him whose face isn't seen. We have no reason to believe that she's there, Karina is. He's just here by himself, and then nuns are walking around. And a nun walks up to his bed, and we can't see her face right away. She's just doing the normal thing, but in my head I'm just saying, it's her. It's her, it's her, I don't know what she's doing here, I don't know how she got here, I don't know how she knows he's here, but it's her, it's definitely her. And then boom, there she is. She is the nun, of course. So, it's just full of stuff like that. But it's not without some good moments. Like I said, I really like the moments where we actually get to see Salazar telling the story. I love the scenes with Salazar and Barbossa face to face, mostly because I wasn't even into the characters at this point. It was just like seeing Jeffrey Rush and Javier Bardem face to face, these acting giants doing their thing right up in each other's faces. Even in a movie like this, it was just really cool, and I would have loved for that have been a lot of it, but yeah, so that's what it is. So I understand that, like I said, a lot of people like it. I'm sure a lot of people, you know, just loosen up and say whatever, but And I do tend to get on people's cases too for like I'm a big defender for most of the Fast and Furious movies, even though I kind of hated the last one. But where people do take stuff too seriously, they nitpick stuff too much, which is maybe what I'm doing here. I don't know, but I feel like if this movie's purpose was to be entertaining, I didn't find it like that at all. I actually found it between the predictability and the writers being lazy, the when in doubt, use Jack's compass as a plot point thing. There's the, it's like on Stranger Tides with the Fountain of Youth, and it's like, this time we're gonna go get Poseidon's Trident. It's like, it's literally like Pirates is turning into National Treasure. When it's, initially I thought, you know, National Treasure was supposed to be like this sort of, we're gonna cash in on the popularity of Pirates a year later when it came out. Now it seems to almost be the reverse. It's weird. But they should probably get their shit together if they're gonna keep going, so, we'll see if that tease is going to amount to anything, or if Depp will finally say, Depp will go through with what Henry 2 may have been saying with that alternate ending that he wrote, and it's like, maybe he's done, because I would like to believe they're going to stick to their word. If Depp's done, they are too, because that's going to be a lot of money to put into something that will probably fail if Jack Sparrow's not in it, so, and they're not going to recast, there's no way they'd recast him, so it's just going to, they'll just do the thing where he's just not in it, but it's a Pirates movie. It's like, yeah, if Henry and Karina are going to be your new main characters, good luck finding an audience. I wish you the absolute best of luck. You're going to need it. So, tomorrow I am probably going to give you that versus that I was going to do last week. And then, like I said, I've got 2 more that should be coming. So, next week, I believe, is Wonder Woman. So we'll see. No idea. Absolutely no idea. I'm just going to go in neutral and we'll see what happens. And then so on. And like obviously we'll pick up Fargo again next week and see where that's headed at this point. So yes, that's what we're looking at. I really wish I could have enjoyed it like a lot of audiences seem to be, but I did not. So we're done.